So I typically like to review these games in release date order. The last game I reviewed was Need for Speed Carbon, and so that would mean that Need for Speed Pro Street would be up next. However, and I gotta be honest here, I'm skipping on reviewing that game. I tried Pro Street for the first time somewhat recently and was just so off put by the super artsy menus where I just found it hard to navigate and see which options I was selecting. And the driving controls and just the format of the entire game didn't appeal to me in the worst way possible. Now, granted, Black Box sought to make drastic changes, and I do have to commend them for at least taking a chance. Even though it wasn't for me, I wouldn't say the game was horrible by any means. It's just that I found it so annoying to navigate, and I personally didn't enjoy the more short circuit and draft style events that seemed to echo throughout its entire career mode. Today, however, I'm checking out the follow-up to that game, next year's game, which feels like an apologist fever dream of someone desperately trying to get back to the grassroots of the franchise, that being the old Hot Pursuit and Most Wanted days. This is Need for Speed Undercover, which is a traditional Need for Speed game in the sense that you get this cheesy career mode with an emphasis on street racing. And in fact, right away, I was quite surprised. And I must first preface this by explaining to you all that, I was playing this game for the first time. I didn't really know too much about it, and I was going in as fresh as could possibly be and just enjoying my first playthrough. But I had no idea that this game really was the precursor for what led the path for modern Need for Speed titles today. Undercover involves both a legal and illegal street racing scene that takes place at both dusk and nightfall. Now, this should sound immediately familiar to anyone who's played the last two Need for Speed titles, especially Heat, as it follows a very similar structure to those games. You build a reputation, and this whole narrative pits you as this sort of undercover federal investigator, trying to track down and infiltrate this illegal street racing gang. And so off you are to actually racing cars, avoiding the cops, building your reputation, and ultimately getting in lots of trouble. And by the end of the game, which is the footage that you're actually watching right now, I have to say it's quite satisfying to take down all these high-ranking gang members that you sort of had to suck up to throughout the entire runtime. Now, all of this may sound quite forward-looking and cool, but Undercover is not perfect. And while this is a solid attempt of at least trying to recreate the magic that Most Wanted and Carbon offered, I have to say that this game feels as if it was developed by an inexperienced team and lacks a bit of focus surrounding what type of racer it kind of wants to be. I have some issues with the game. I'm going to go over it in the later portion of this video, but for now I want to break down what this game gets right. And immediately at the start here, the first impression I got was just how great the graphics are. This is the Xbox 360 version of the game. Like all Need for Speed titles, this is not backwards compatible on the Series X, so you do need original hardware to experience this game. But I have to say that this is a gorgeous looking racer. It helps as well that you get this really great evening setting in the game. Like, there's no day and night cycle that's dynamic, but you get this beautiful low-hanging sun as if it's late afternoon, and this casts large and rich shadows all over the environment and bathes the rest of the scene in this warm light. This has the result of creating gorgeous reflections off your car, and as you're racing through these industrial and commercial areas, you'll just see the world beautifully reflected off the paint of the cars, and it just looks fantastic. Environmental wise, I have to say this looks solid as well. There's really nothing else to complain about here. I do think visually this must have been quite an impressive looking game back during its prime. And to anyone who would be, booting up the game for the first time today, I have to say I think they'd be hard-pressed to say the game looks dated by these days. Now, you also get real FMV sequences recorded in place of cutscenes, just like the classic Need for Speed games. However, I have to say that this time you do not get that odd animated filter over all the characters and the actors. It's just standard video filmed as if it was a crime thriller TV series, and I think it looks good. They got Maggie Q as the main cover girl in this one, and she delivers a solid enough performance, acting more as your handler and giving you tips and details on your targets, and that's really solid all throughout. Performance-wise as well, I was quite happy with this too. It's certainly not perfect, this is a 30 FPS game, but I do have to say it's solid enough to the point where I never felt the frame rate hindered my enjoyment of the actual game itself. So technically speaking, this is a solid effort that at least impresses with good art direction. However, I must say that I heard the PlayStation 3 version of this game is an unfortunate victim of just poor cross-platform development. So the 360 version seems to be the one you want to get and play if you are looking across those different versions. Sound wise as well, again, can't complain too much about it here. Everything is appropriately conveyed and recorded. The cars sound really good. There's also a nice selection of music. The voice acting and just really the acting in general, is enjoyable to watch. It's not tone deaf in any way. I do think this game on a whole takes itself a bit more serious compared to the other games, which may actually lead it to be a little bit less memorable than titles like Most Wanted and Carbon. But when it comes down to it, all the factors here that make up a solid running, solid sounding, solid looking game have all been hits. And so you could, sort of start this one up today and just have no issues, or at least not feel like you're playing something that just is totally outdated. All right, everyone, let's take a quick look at the Need for Speed Undercover box art on Xbox 360. We've got some decent cover art here. We got a look at the Porsche kind of outrunning some cops, and then a nice look at Maggie Q up there in the top left. Here's a look at the spine. And on the back here, we got some basic gameplay details, kind of sets up the premise of the world and kind of what you'll be doing in the different events and sort of cars that you'll be driving in the game. So, yeah, sort of a look at what to expect, I suppose. Now, if we open it up here, I unfortunately do not have a manual, and I have a Platinum Hits disc, but the 360 had no issue reading this, and I was able to install it to the hard drive as well for some faster loading times. So all that was fine on that front. So yeah, cool look at the Need for Speed Undercover box art. But this game has one major issue, and unfortunately it was significant enough that it kept this game for me from truly reaching the heights of the Most Wanted franchise, or even Carbon for that matter, despite it being a shorter game than this. And that's the car handling. Now, it's a weird thing to say, especially when the series is known to having, a particular driving style, but none of the cars handle that great in the game. Driving here feels, unfortunately, as stiff as a board, and these cars rarely spin or lose traction. They sort of feel like they're glued to the street the entire time. But to add further insult, the latency and the responsiveness of the vehicles itself seem to either just be delayed or are just not strong enough. It's a weird feeling. It wasn't until I reached the last couple hours of the game where I was earning enough cash and I had enough of a reputation to finally invest and purchase the best cars in the game. And what I'm driving here is the Porsche Carrera GT, which is technically rated as the best car in the game. I have it souped up and fully upgraded. But it wasn't until I reached this level where finally the driving controls felt decent. Not once during my entire playthrough of the game could I ever say the driving felt good. And I'm trying my best to remain objective here because, it has nothing in common with the way that the other Need for Speed titles played. The Most Wanted games, the Carbon games, or even the Hot Pursuit controls. It lacks the deeply rooted realism that Pro Street was trying to emulate as well. So effectively, what we have here is an entirely new signature to the way that this game feels when it comes to the driving. And for me, it just never once felt right. I wouldn't say I was struggling in the beginning, but there are certain races in this where it sort of takes a bit of back and forth. You're trying to navigate the turns and learn the behavior of your vehicle, and the way the AI is driving and the way these cars handle, just it takes a bit of getting used to. I think the best comparison I can make is that the cars themselves feel like jacked up battery powered toys. Like if you remember those little whining electric vehicles with controllers that you used to get as a kid, that's sort of the driving in this game. I didn't care for it one bit, and while this may seem like a weird thing to sort of dock the experience for, it's inherent to the actual functionality of the entire game. It's a driving game with poor driving controls, and it's such an odd distinction. In any case, the game isn't tough, and the entire playthrough took me around 8 to 10 hours to complete, so at least it's decent enough in length and content. Legitimately, I did have a decent time with the game. It didn't immediately make me want to quit it like Pro Street did, and it felt like more of an effort was put in compared to Carbon, so that's good. But it certainly is odd that they have this formula that was proven and tried and worked, yet they felt the need to revisit that and completely redefine their entire control scheme. In any case, there is a lot to enjoy here with Need for Speed Undercover. It's got the charm, it's got the character, with some variances as well in the races thanks to the events in the street racing scene changes. But I don't believe this quite hits the level that we had with Most Wanted or even the earlier Hot Pursuit games. It's simply decent and serviceable enough to be enjoyable, but lacking in anything that's really, truly memorable. So in any case, let me know what you guys think, and we'll talk later. I appreciate you all watching this reminiscing video and hope you all have a fantastic day. Thank you.